To start a business, a new business with a new product that's highly innovative, that is very much like bungee jumping without a rope. Not maybe watched by the entire world, but those people that were on the inside of the bike industry and triathlon specifically, they could start to see that we won half Ironmans, full Ironmans, and so it was proof that the product was really working, and not just through testing and through a website or through marketing, but based on race results, and race results tops everything.
This guy has made an assertive move. This could be a race-defining move.
22, 23 years old. This is the race of his life.
Yeah, big change in my life, I would say.
The VinFast Ironman 70.3 world champion is Rico Bogen from Germany.
The Q Aerocam certainly gave me speed on the bike, for sure. I'm able to ride it even faster.
5 minutes! We all knew there was a lot of potential last, but boy has he biked. So not only are they fighting both for the age group 35-39, they're also fighting for the overall age group.
It was fantastic. I think Lars did so well, and I think it was a really, really good day.
Third, 45 seconds. This is race day for Magda here in Fréjus at the challenge event. Magda, third, 2 minutes, third. 1 minute. You gotta stay focused. 5 minutes on number 2, 7 on number 3. The TF1 Concept, as Richard presented it to me as an idea and as a concept in January 2019, was something that, I thought there's so many bike companies out there, why do we need another bike company? But while talking 5 minutes to Richard and for him to explain the fork and the front of the bike, what later became the fast fork technology, it was just so radical. It was just so kind of like out of this world that I was just like, whoa, hang on. A fork that doesn't have a steer tube, the head tube that's been taken away and flipped around and put between the rider's arms. I don't think there would be many factories that will even be willing to produce this. But once Richard explained the technology and the engineering, and then backed it up with test data and simulations and computational fluid dynamics results, that just showed that this was something really new and something that the bike industry and the triathlon industry had not seen yet. So it was really worth the thinking and the exploring of this route. And well, it didn't take too long to really explore what he had thought of over a 5-year period. I just felt this really has some major potential that could actually shake up the bike industry. So Richard and I, after we kind of like got in touch, and I could really smell that Richard had done something very special, and it didn't come out of nowhere. He had his history, 50 years of history in Formula One. If you have built race cars for the best drivers on the world for 15 years, if you've been part of several World Championship, 91 Grand Prix wins with the likes of Michael Schumacher or Jos Verstappen, and you know that much about carbon composites, about aerodynamics, when you have built tons of products that are used by many high-end brands in the market, where Richard was working at 3T Cycling as a technical director, you know he's seen the pitfalls, the challenges. We went to factories that were not really interested to build the TF1 because they felt the front of the bike was so complex, so radical, and also so dangerous from a production point of view. There's never been any doubt, but we've had plenty of obstacles. But that's, when you look back, that's been part of the journey. It's been an exceptional experience, and I would say everything that Richard set out at the beginning was really what happened. And yeah, then you go from strength to strength and you build real trust in each other as partners.
When I left Ferrari, and I basically went as a consultant to offer my knowledge of composite materials, aerodynamics, whatever was of interest from my experience in Formula One to other industries. When I was approached by an Italian component brand called 3T, and it was like, you know, could you design us some composite components for a bicycle? I thought, I've done Formula One. How hard can it be? And the biggest challenge was a lot of if you imagine a handlebar, it's quite an intricate shape. It's incredibly structural, because if a handlebar fails, it's no less dangerous for a rider at 50 kilometers an hour than a suspension failing on a Formula One car at 200 miles an hour. The driver's generally very well protected. The cyclist isn't. You know, they're separated from the road by lycra. So the structural and safety requirements were equally as high on the bicycle. It was way more challenging than I anticipated, with the arrogance of someone that's come from Formula One. But it was fun to adapt. And then there were things that you could bring in and introduce. So there was a lot. I actually learned a lot. And when people say, oh, it must be such a, you know, implying basically that it was a step down from Formula One to the bike industry. If I just look at it from an engineering challenge point of view, it was not as easy as you might have anticipated.
In February 2020, we took the very first Coup TF1 to a velodrome in Germany, where we worked with an aero and bike fitting company in Germany, where we had the very first time. The bike had never rolled on the parking lot. I wanted to get a ride in on the bike, but there was no time. And that's how it goes in product development sometimes. And so we went to this track, and I remember Richard's face in awe and also like really worried, is this all going to work? And it went around the track, the first lap, the second lap, and then we took 2 days on the track and we collected data, and it was incredible what happened there, what we experienced there, because suddenly there was data produced, CDA data, that the whole team there were looking at, that they were actually playing with their equipment to see is the equipment correctly measuring all the test data, because the CDA was that low. That technical team had just worked with a Kona champion that they worked for a number of days to reduce his CDA. And after 3 days of testing, they reduced the CDA through changes on the bike, apparel, helmets, and they brought it down to a point that they kind of like whispered to me. They said, where this athlete has just ended, 3 days of testing, that's the same data, the same level where you guys are testing right at the beginning. No tuning, nothing changed, no helmet, no apparel. And right there in that moment, I was like, this is gonna work. And I think that was a very proud moment, but we still know there was a long way to go.
The way that TT bikes or tri-bikes had developed was the focus had been on very low drag for the bike. You wanted a bike with a very low drag number so you could sell it to an athlete. And then you had to they make it in 3, 4, 5 sizes. And I think it was clear that you can do that, and you can make the bike smaller and smaller, and you get a very low drag, but most of the drag is coming from the rider. And what I felt was being missed was that if you, instead of just making all the aerodynamic parts of making the frame very small, trying to make the frame invisible so that 80% of the rider, the 20% that's coming from the frame, you try and make that, you reduce that value of that 20%, was that you can get more out of trying to reduce the 80% rider. What I think the trend in TT bikes that has been going for 15 years to where we are now, and what it means is they all look the same, was that they were trying to get the frame really compact, and no one was actually using the air and saying, we could actually I'm pretty sure the drag of the TF1 is higher than most of these other bikes. If you put it in a wind tunnel, the drag would be high. But what we saw from the CFD was as soon as you put a rider on it, we actually dropped the drag of the rider. When I got the results of the CFD for the TF1 to match the P5, sure, the drag of the bike parts was higher, but the percentage gain we got by dropping the drag of the rider, we upped the drag of the bike by 2 or 3%. But it's 2 or 3% of a very small amount. But we dropped the drag of the rider by 3%. That was 3% of the 80% of the overall, and that's where we gained. By making the air do some work and saying, well, where does the rider fit? So the starting point was get rid of the bike. And when you blank out the bike, you realize most people's aero position within quite a small envelope, regardless of the size. So if you take out the bike and you've got no idea of scale, so you don't actually know how big the rider is, the aero position is very, very similar, obviously. And if you then say, well, where would I put aerodynamic surfaces? If I wanted to improve the drag of this shape, where would I put the aerodynamic surfaces? You wouldn't end up with a current TT bike. Hopefully you'd end up with something like the TF1. So, and once you've done that, so once you say, right, I'm going to put all the surfaces here, and there's reasons for, the down tube acts as a splitter. So if you look at the action of your knee largely follows the down tube. So the down tube is always acting as a splitter. Whereas if you look at a conventional bike, you have the fork, then the down tube, then the big open triangle with a lot of turbulence, and then the knees are thrashing around in that open section. But if we can manipulate, so it starts with the fork. So there were certain enabling technologies that were coming in while I was thinking of this concept. One was finally getting the acceptance of roadies to go to disc brakes. So it was clear that was going to come. And that's obviously the key one, because once you go to disc brakes, you remove the design restriction of having to have the crown of the fork over the top of the wheel to fit the rim brake. So I already thought if we could move the head tube up in between the rider's arms, that can open up a lot of access to do something with the flow. At that point, I wasn't really sure what, but you could do something with the flow if you had something over the top of the tyre, a bigger gap over the top of the tyre. Disc brakes, it was clear then that completely opened, because you didn't need a hole and a bridge you could get rid of any extra bridge over the top of the tyre. So that opened everything up. And then when you look at the rider in an aero position and the path that their knee traces, it was clear what we wanted to do with that flow was get the flow at the top of the fork as close to their knee as possible, and then have a split so you could get control of the flow right at the very front of the bike, which is effectively what you're trying to do with an F1 car. You get control of the flow with the wing and with those side plates. And from that moment on, the air is working for you. And you say, right, this is where you got to go. Some of it's going to go into the radiator ducts for cooling. Some of it goes underneath the car, because an F1 car, you're trying to generate downforce. Some of it's going into the brake ducts at the rear to cool the rear brakes. Some of it's got to go onto the rear wing to get the downforce. But it's pretty stupid stuff. And if you can tell it where to go and it'll obey you, you can really make it do some work. So the idea was we get control of the flow with the fork. We say, right, we want you to go here, and we want you to start to separate, either separate around the outside of the rider's legs, or actually go in between the rider's legs. And what we found was it's actually slightly better to get the flow moving around the outside of the rider's legs, and then use the wide down tube as a splitter between the knees, so the bit that's stirring up all the trouble and making a mess of what you've just got control of. We can largely keep control of it as it goes down between the rider's legs and hits the down tube. So all the parts are positioned with where the rider is in mind, and they're shaped with what part of the rider do we want them to work for us. We want the air to go. So we have the little extensions to the fork where the aero extensions go. They're shaped and angled as well in order to kind of pick up. There's a lot of dirty air comes off the back of the arms of the rider. So we try and get control of that, working with that wide head tube just behind the fork there, behind the rider's arms, and get that to work as it all goes. So the whole idea is to get the air so it knows, hey, there's a rider coming, start to get out the way now.
I can tell you this, the bike makes a difference. I know Lance Armstrong once wrote a book, it's not about the bike. I can tell you, it is about the bike in triathlon business. It's about comfortability. So on the bike, I've never felt so comfortable. And this was a 102 kilometer bike, so it's a little bit longer than 90k. And I felt super. The last 20 k's I could go like, okay, I'm now gonna go harder even. If you lie down and you tuck in, you can actually feel you can hear the wind. Today the wind was a bit in our faces coming in, and then if you lie down and you're all tucked in and all aerodynamic, you can feel you are aerodynamic out there. So you can feel slicing through the wind. And never ever since doing this since 2017, running off the bike, my legs immediately felt good. So I didn't had no wobbly legs, and it was a climby, hilly course. Yeah, so I ran off the bike, felt smooth, and I think important is like the full 21 k's I felt good. It wasn't like, oh, I feel I want to cramp in the quad, so I want to cramp in the glute or something. So it does matter.
Where would you put the parts of the bike to make the athlete, that body shape, more aerodynamic, rather than focusing on making an aerodynamic bike? And this, to make that work with different size athletes, is why we have to take the approach to build every bike according to every athlete's bike fit.
For 20 years now, bikes have been, or for donkey years, bikes have been sold like underwear. Small, medium and large. We have actually said we need to stop the fact that people buy a bike first and then get a bike fit, but to change that around. First get your bike fit well before you purchase, define all your biomechanics, define your aerodynamics on the bike, your performance stability, your bike handling skills, get all of that done at a really high quality, qualified, cool bike fitter, and then we start to build the bike underneath the athlete.
Basically, the concept ignores the industry dogma, if you like, of designing a very sleek and sexy low drag bike, giving a nice colorway, and then selling small, medium and large to customers who then have to go and get themselves fitted to it. And selling those bikes on the basis of a few professional riders being paid to get big results. The nicest thing is to see that concept of the aerodynamics working to improve individual athletes across such a broad range of individual athletes that have seen that success over the past 2 or 3 years. We've been working with those athletes with KooCycle.
When we launched our business in 2019, we were very fortunate to have an angel investor who fully believed in us as a team, in the product, and the process that we were implementing. But somewhere in the very first few months, The investor said, don't you need a top quality, big professional athlete? I said, well, yeah, we can talk to Jan Ferdino. He's a great guy, but give us 250,000 euros and we can try and talk to Jan. But Jan was already connected to big brands. But I actually said, I think for half of the money, we can launch an entire different strategy, which is don't buy champions, but build champions. And that's a process that I'm quite fortunate and very grateful that I've experienced between 2007 and 2013 with the professional triathlon team, Team TBB. That's where I really learned, working of course with a phenomenal coach who had a lot of experience, that when you can select talents, when you can bring them in an environment where success is inevitable and that success leads to more successes, you can actually take young athletes, provide them hope and opportunity through a journey where you guide them from becoming a faster age group athlete, a winning age group athlete, and to then take a very difficult gap to take them from age group amateur to a professional athlete. That was really much more inspiring to both Richard and myself, and that's what really led to the Next Gen program. So we never bought a very big professional name, but instead took the slow route, very difficult route, to go bottom up and try if we can build champions ourselves. With Rico Bogan, we can say that process went a lot faster than we could have ever imagined. Once we made a decision to not plow a lot of marketing dollars in getting a professional athlete to ride our bike, we basically committed ourselves 100% to fast age groupers. Having a new technology, but knowing ourselves all the test data, we were 100% convinced that we can take an age grouper from a top 10 position to a top 5 position, or a top 5 position into a podium, or qualify for Kona, or become a pro. That's the program we set out, and we implemented it through a Next Gen program where we literally invited some of the fastest age group males and females across 10 countries to join this program, to not get a free bike, but to invest in the program, and to then have a whole structure and process from picking up a bike to getting tuned, to go to an aero camp, to support athletes in learning how much they could save by aerodynamics, by looking at data, by applying science to the process, that we could really, and result proven, take athletes to a whole new level. And that's so exciting.
Do you know which aero center do you have?
Just looking at the numbers, so we've downloaded both sets of data from both Alpha Mantis and the Aero Lab, and the suit was pretty good. So we were repeating, so we've repeated effectively 3 runs. So we repeated run 36, we repeated run 36 as run 42, and we repeated run 42 but with the skin fit suit. And we're seeing between those 3 repeats, we're seeing about a 7 to 10 watt difference with the suit rather than without.
Yeah, it's correct that we measure wind, but it's seen as a yaw, but it's not actually technically a yaw. It's a turbulence that we measure, and the system is able to contribute and understand how the wind is measured with the bike, how the bike handles wind. But with Per is a very stable professional rider that is very easy to repeatable testing, and very consistent in his testing. So it's ideal when we're using both concepts, both systems on the aero testing on the track, that we can precisely see any changes that we make in his position. And it was in the beginning a little bit frustrating until we managed to find the optimal cockpit setup. And then once we stabilized that, and physiologically also with his lactate and everything was stable, then we looked at helmets, and then ultimately the full race setup with the skin fit race suit. And yeah, there was a lot of gains, a lot of adaptation.
You heard the experts, and thanks to a lot of testing today and adjustments on the cockpit, we saved 10 watts, and with the skin fit race suit, with the brand new one, we saved another 7 watts. So I'm really impressed about today, and yeah, looking forward to the next race.
We've always set up to be very transparent about our data, what the bike actually does. I'm very reluctant to make big claims that if I'm put in a chair with lights and a camera, that I can't back up with data. As an engineer, you know, that's everything. And from the very first test we did at a track in Germany with the first 2 prototype bikes, the results there, we knew we had something very special. And subsequent to that testing, we did some more, obviously a lot of development testing, but then when we started to work with individual athletes and customers, and we gave them the opportunity to experience what error testing and product testing and development, and giving them an experience that very few professional triathletes get to do, in terms of seeing their data and how small changes to their position or to how they use the equipment that we're providing for them can benefit them, and educating them on what that data means. When they look at marketing BS, they can start to filter what's true data from the marketing BS of other companies. And then I hope then they see that what we're showing and what we're telling you about the performance of the TF1 is actually backed by that data and can be validated. I think our main target is that we have to be able to measure an improvement outside. It's very easy, maybe not so easy day to day, but it's actually quite a simple process to go to a wind tunnel and get very, very precise results, and tiny, or the marginal gains is the common expression. But if you can't see those gains outside, then it's very unlikely that they're making a significant benefit. So we do all our testing outdoors and in different weather conditions. And we can be confident that an athlete is going to see an improvement from a particular modification, or maybe a change of their clothing or their helmet, but any upgrade or modification that we make, if we can measure the gain outside in the conditions that they will race, then we can be confident that they will see that gain on race day.
So we launched the Next Gen program late 2020. We selected our first I believe 6 or 8 age group athletes, a Dutch team, a German next gen team. Marleen de Boer was definitely a role model in terms of adopting the program, realizing what the bike meant for her performance. We can now say, looking back, that once she started to aboard the TF1, that on a half Ironman time she gained something like 10-15 minutes. When she was doing her first Ironman in Finland, where she qualified for the Ironman St. George World Championship, she cut her from previous years' time by some 20-23 minutes. So she qualified for St. George. I flew out to St. George. I felt something special could happen in St. George. Marleen's a very committed athlete, really good swimmer. She would be in the front pack. Now we knew she had a fast bike. She has a mean run in her legs. Her parents were there for a few days before the race. They managed everything in great detail. We would sit in the car, drive half of the bike ride, look where the corners were. They were really well prepared, well detailed. We could share stories about Team TBB, and Marleen was ready. And yeah, to see her in that swim in the lake, fly on the bike, and on the run, where I was hanging out with her parents. We were making videos at the aid stations to just experience what she went through there and to win that race. The female Ironman world champion, age group overall, with a gap of, I believe, 23 minutes on number 2. What an incredible achievement. And for both Richard and me, it was a breakthrough moment. But it was at the same time also something we believed that this was the beginning of more, and that more could be won, and that slowly we could now grow towards the pro level and questioning ourselves, how long will it take before we can achieve this with a professional athlete? And